Welcome back. As you know, I'm Eli the Computer Guy here for the Daily Blob, where I think about a history lesson I learned when I was backpacking through India oh so many years ago. Decades ago! Holy crap, I'm getting older. Anyways, I went to this, the head or the capital of an old empire called Hampi, Hampi. Amazing place to go. If you ever go to India, Hampi is just absolutely beautiful. But it had been the capital of the empire, and it had been able to maintain its empire by doing something rather innovative for the time. Basically, the people that created Hampi put Hampi in an absolutely kind of miserable location for actually having a civilization. Didn't have a lot of running water, that type of thing, rivers and streams and that type of deal. And so it was relatively inhospitable. And so what they did is they created this whole canal system to bring water in from very far away to make Hampi livable. And then that was the way that they were able to secure their empire. The idea is that they have their capital in this very inhospitable place. If armies try to come in to try to attack them, those armies will have to go through all this kind of wasteland before they get to Hampi. That's going to degrade the armies. People are going to die, the whole 9 yards. So essentially, by the time the army could get to Hampi, it would already be degraded to such a degree that the soldiers at Hampi could deal with them relatively easily, right? And they're able to have their empire for quite a long time until somebody else started looking at their engineering. And they started saying, well, let's see, the reason that Hampi is so defensible is because it's in the middle of this incredibly arid area, and going through this arid area is very difficult for soldiers or whatever else. The way that they're able to survive in the middle of this arid area is because of their canal system. So, I don't know, what if we destroyed their canal system? And so they destroyed their canal system. And Hampi fell. And Hampi fell. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. Why meet the other army on the battlefield when you can simply destroy the canal system and the other army will die of thirst? Seems like winner, winner, chicken dinner to me. I think about this in the modern world back when the war in Iraq was happening, and there's the idea of why we were winning the war in Iraq. Remember when we thought we were winning the war in Iraq? I remember that. Iraq? Remember when we used to talk about Iraq? Anyways, that's a story for another time. One of the arguments for why we were quote-unquote winning the war in Iraq was actually our MBAs, or Masters of Business Administration. The idea being is that when you try to wage war half a world away, that MBAs actually become more important than infantry folks at the end of the day. Making sure food can basically be procured, can actually be purchased, can be delivered, half a world away, and then actually be given to the soldiers in the front. Think about this, right? When you send soldiers off to a forward operating base, right? They have to get food. Think about the food and the ammunition and all the support supplies that they require. And so you have to have people. You have to have some system in place to get corn from fucking Ohio in the United States, process that into a usable thing, put that on a ship, deliver that halfway around the world, get it on the helicopters, and airdrop it into a forward operations base, that type of thing, right? And I always kind of thought that was a fascinating thing to be thinking about, like with what does warfare actually look like? How do you win wars, right? The whole idea that an army marches on its stomachs, right? I think that was Napoleon or whatever else when they came up with a canned food, right? Is the cannon, the machine gun, or canned food more important for modern warfare? And so why this comes up right now is the United States is involved in a lot of things around the world. We're just so involved in a lot of things. And one of the questions becomes, is what happens when we have an F-35 and they don't have an F-35, right? It's like with Iraq, right? When we were winning Iraq, right? I remember there's a in the news cycle for about 8 hours, and about 8 hours in the news cycle, there was when the Abrams tank got taken out by an IED, right? So our tank, or one of the most advanced pieces of military hardware to ever be designed, incredibly well armored, the whole 9 yards. It was just rolling down a road one day, an IED with a shaped charge went off beside it, and blah, that Abrams tank went away, right? And that's an interesting thing to be thinking about. Like, what happens when we have Abrams tanks and F-35s and all of that kind of stuff, and they have, I don't know, diesel fuel and fertilizer? How does war start to look that way? And the other thing that I get concerned about is what gets talked a lot about in the news, many times, is that basically our military is so expensive to run that one of the big questions is what happens if you kneecap our economy? Right? Do you need to shoot an F-35 out of the sky? Or do you need to make it so horribly expensive to fly an F-35 for a country that they simply don't have the money for the fuel to be able to fly it? Right? And that's where I get concerned in this modern world, right? We're supposed to be spending $1 trillion on our military this year. More hospitals? No. Better education system? No. $1 trillion for military? Sure, whatever. Anyways, and so one of the curious questions is, like, when you have like the Houthis down in the Red Sea, and they start sending missiles at container ships, right? Is that, at the end of the day, actually going to be much more devastating for an economy like ours, for a country like ours, than us bombing their headquarters? Right? We bomb their headquarters, like, oh, look, X number of their leaders die. If they make it so that main shipping channels are no longer secure, what does that mean for our society? And this comes up in the technology world, because one of the things I find fascinating with the technology world right now is how disassociated the technology world is from the wider world, especially from things like violence. It is curious, right? For my generation, many of us that were in the tech world came from the military, right? I started in the Army. Many of the people I knew, it was a much more, people that had started in technology in one of the military services, they go into the IT world. And so there's like a psychology that goes along with that. That's basically gone away, right? Over the past 25 years, it's just not the same thing the way it used to be. And what's kind of curious now is we have all of these technology companies that are worth trillions of dollars, and I don't know, it doesn't feel like there is a real emphasis towards things like physical security, operational security, these types of things. And it is curious to think about like how weak these systems could be if somebody just simply decided to specifically attack these systems, right? There's this whole idea with security through obscurity, that things are secure because people don't know to go after them. But there's also a lot of stuff in the world where things are secure because people don't go after them, right? If people do not attack something, then it's secure enough. The question is what happens if people decide that's a valid target? Right, and that comes up with Microsoft, and something for all of us to be considering with their undersea cables. Microsoft Cloud Services disrupted by Red Sea cable cuts. So there are all these undersea cables. So fiber optic cables literally are all around the world, going under the oceans, connecting countries together. They're what create the internet that we have today. And the interesting thing is they are simply fiber optic cables. They can be cut relatively easily. And an interesting question then is what happens if people start going after those fiber optic cables? What if there is a focus on going after those fiber optic cables? What does that mean for us? And when you're thinking about in your security position, when you're thinking about being a CIO, a CTO, and you're thinking about risk management and that type of deal, what would happen if the fiber links drop, right? So many companies now, it's just-in-time inventory, it's global commerce, that type of deal. What happens if all the fiber links out of your country got cut? What would happen with your business? Would you still be able to do business? If people still wanted to do business with you, right? If people still wanted to buy your product was so good or whatever else, they still want to buy your product, but the internet was cut. Do you have some kind of system in place to allow them to still be able to place orders? You know, it's an interesting thing to think about. When you talk about your disaster recovery scenarios, right? If cables get cut or whatever else, does your disaster recovery scenario still work in that particular environment? Microsoft's Azure cloud services have been disrupted by undersea cable cuts in the Red Sea, the U.S. tech giant says. Users of Azure, one of the world's leading cloud computing platforms, would experience delays because of problems with internet traffic moving through the Middle East. Microsoft did not explain what might have caused the damage to the undersea cables, but added that it had been able to reroute traffic through other paths. Over the weekend, there were reports suggesting that undersea cable cuts had affected the UAE and some countries in Asia. An update posted on Microsoft's website on Saturday said the Azure traffic going through the Middle East, quote, may experience increased latency due to undersea fiber cuts in the Red Sea. It stressed that traffic, quote, that does not traverse through the Middle East is not impacted. On Saturday, NetBlocks, an organization that monitors network internet access, said a series of undersea cable cuts in the Red Sea had affected internet services in several countries, including India and Pakistan. The Pakistan telecommunication company said in an X post that the cuts occurred in waters near the Saudi city of Jeddah and warned that internet services could be affected during peak hours. In February of 2024, several communication cables in the Red Sea were cut, affecting internet traffic between Asia and Europe. The incident happened about a month after Yemen's internationally recognized government warned that the Iran-backed Houthi movement might sabotage the cables and attack ships in the Red Sea. In the Baltic Sea, a series of undersea cables and gas pipelines have been damaged and suspected attacks since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Earlier this year, Swedish authorities seized a ship suspected of damaging a cable running under the Baltic Sea in Latvia. Prosecutors said an initial investigation pointed to sabotage. So it looks like Microsoft's cables in the Red Sea were cut, and this is one of many incidents over the past number of years to show that these cables are getting cut. And so this is kind of one of those things to kind of be pondering, right, as a technology professional and decision maker when you start thinking about, you know, security of your particular systems, right? One of the things that I find really interesting is these people that say we're already at war, right? Eli, we're already at war with China or Russia or whoever else. And what's fascinating to me, right? They'll sit there with their beers and their cup of coffee and they'll, right, I am stupid to not realize that we are already in a war. But then one of the funny parts is with these people talking about we're already in a war is that they don't actually seem to be putting themselves in that particular posture. If you believe we are already in cyber war, then one of the questions that comes up is what are your counterintelligence capabilities, right? Again, what are your capabilities if somebody, you know, from a nation state actor or from the Houthis or whatever else tries to get a job in your company? What do you have to try to block that type of thing from occurring? If a bomb goes out and literally obliterates a data center, think about this, right? So if a nuke goes off, Northern Virginia, a lot of people kind of ignore Northern Virginia for some reason. Northern Virginia is either the biggest or one of the biggest data center areas in the entire country. There's all of these major fiber lines that go through Northern Virginia. It's weird. When everybody talks about tech, right, they obviously talk about San Francisco, or they talk about Seattle, or they talk about Austin, or Miami is the cool new tech scene. Like, it's weird. Very few people talk about Northern Virginia. It's a rather important place in the tech world. People just don't talk about it, right? So one of the things to think about, right, if a nuke goes off, a nuke going off over DC is going to be bad all the way around. But what happens if there's a tremendous amount of data center capability? Just go, right? Have you built your systems in such a way to be able to maintain operations and that type of thing? Right? Again, when you think about like backups and all that kind of thing, are you backing up? Is your disaster recovery scenario backing up from one cloud to go into a different cloud? But if one bomb goes off, both of those clouds get taken offline. Right. I think this is one of those things to just kind of like really be considering right now, because this kind of stuff is probably going to get worse. Also, when we talk about things like latency, so latency is important for real-time communication, not just real-time communication, but also things like encryption. So when data is going back and forth for encryption, right, it's doing all these tests to verify that the encryption hasn't been compromised. Like when you're dealing with VPN services, if there's latency issues or if there's weird problems in your lines, it can cause real problems for VPN. So I dealt with this when in Baltimore. So Baltimore City has obviously a lot of old buildings, but one of the big problems with those old buildings is that they actually got wired up relatively early for things like telephone systems. So their telephone wires go back to the 1940s or the 1950s or whatever else. So when we were installing DSL, the DSL would work kind of sort of fine enough. Like it worked fine enough. You could download your whatever you're downloading, right? But then we would have our users try to connect to VPN services, and there would be all kinds of problems. And the reason is literally the wiring in the buildings was so old and so crappy that basically when the traffic went through the internal wiring, it would just cause havoc on the traffic. And so when the VPN server was trying to verify that the traffic hadn't been compromised, it's seeing all this flaky shit happen to the traffic, and so it just keeps dropping. Right? Basically, with the VPN, anytime it sees the tunnel compromised, it will drop the tunnel, try to recreate the tunnel so that it goes in a different way. Well, what happens when the wiring in the building is the reason you're getting this flaky traffic? And so basically it keeps dropping and reinitializing the tunnel, which basically means your tunnels aren't going to work worth the hell. So one of the things to be considering, right, is even if they get everything back up and running, and it seems to be working good enough to watch Netflix or whatever, is it still stable enough and that type of thing to be able to run the services that you actually need to run? These are some things to ponder and to think about when you're thinking about architecting things, right? There's an architecture style for every generation. Every generation has an architecture style. It used to be mainframes, then it was client server, then service oriented, then it's microservices, now it's serverless, whatever the hell is past serverless. And one of the things to be considering right now is in this world, when hardware is relatively inexpensive and cloud services are relatively inexpensive, how do you most appropriately design your infrastructure for the threat environments that you're looking at? How do you design your infrastructure so that if 1,000 miles away a bomb goes off and takes out a data center, your systems are up and running? Or on the other hand, like if you're in Asheville, North Carolina, and you get a fucking hurricane, if you're in the mountains of Appalachia and get a hurricane and your entire building washes away, how do you also make sure that you have continuity for your business? I think these are a lot of things to consider. So what do you think about this? What do you think about more undersea internet cables being cut? So Microsoft's Azure cables were currently cut. What do you think about this in the wider world of things going on? Again, with the Houthis, with other terrorist organizations, with Iran and that type of deal. I mean, think about that, right? The United States can send stealth bombers halfway around the world and drop bombs on their nuclear facilities. How hard would it be for them to put out those little robot boats, right? We've seen in Ukraine those little robot boats. How hard would it be for them to just put out a couple hundred of those things into the shipping channel and just basically have open CV on the damn thing and say, when you find a boat, run into it? I don't know. That's where I get concerned with like modern war. I don't get concerned. It's not that modern warfare is fundamentally worse than warfare has ever been. It's that this is where I get worried with the politicians in the United States, right? I talk about that with supremacy, right? The idea that we are supreme, right? Because we have F-35s and nuclear weapons and all that kind of stuff. And the problem is though with warfare, like as we should know as Americans, right? During the Revolutionary War, right? The Brits lined up in their very colorful clothing, waiting to do honorable battle. And And we dressed up in camouflage and hid in the forest and plunked their asses from safety. Right? And they were mad. They were angry. We were not honorable. Think about that, right? The losing army always complains how the other army isn't fighting honorably. And you kind of think about that, right? You think about that with whether it's Iraq or Afghanistan or Vietnam. What if that changes into a global kerfuffle? I don't know. Some things to ponder. Some things to ponder, some things to think about for your architecture and your infrastructure. So with that, put your thoughts down below. Give us a thumbs up, give us a thumbs down. Call me amazing, call me a moron. Just do it like a real alpha dog down in the comment section down below. Do remember, Silicon Dojo, our in-person classes are coming back, hopefully soonish. Durham, North Carolina, we are going to have in-person classes. And here in Asheville, North Carolina, we're also going to be having in-person classes again, along with fireside chats. So we're doing a Zoom fireside chat in the beginning of October with the founder of a $2 billion cybersecurity company. So if you're interested in those types of things, make sure to go to silicondojo.com and sign up. And with that, see y'all later.